or it doesn't exist in the first place. It was only available for that instance, and you created a reality out of something that was temporary.
That too. It could be, that too. And um, so now, instead of our, you could imagine a world where we all agreed on the ideals, and what we had to talk about was more surface level details about how to attain those ideals, and what are the different strategies and tactics that could be used, and that's less reflective of individual values and more reflective of just what life experience, how people think, different personalities, right? It's not necessarily like you're an evil person because you're pursuing that ideal, as me, I'm good because I'm pursuing this ideal. It's completely different. If you and I both agree that we need to build more bridges for the city to facilitate more traffic flow or whatnot, we agree to build more bridges. Like, I'm not going to think you're a bad person because you're like, well, I think this 2-year plan is better than this, 18-month plan. It's like,
It
but
doesn't really matter.
we've collapsed. It seems to me that we can't agree on shared ideals, which maybe is in part a result of the loss of religion. And so we're trying to like make up our own ideals. And so look, I'm biased, so I think that the right is still relatively religious, and so, but I would understand if someone was like, well, actually, no, the right is increasing in anti-Semitism, and the right is becoming too, uh, yeah. Let's say I would understand if someone were to bring that criticism up. On the left, what I see is the ideal is essentially compassion, but we kind of mentioned it before, how if your ideal is compassion, it's kind of hard for you to also hold people accountable and talk about things like personal responsibility, right? Because that can come off as discompassionate,
Unempathetic.
unempathetic, right? Like, I feel like it's interesting. Let's kind of pause and reflect here, right? Like, I don't know if you were a little hesitant about like feeling like you might get canceled for that kind of rant you had on personal responsibility and um, accountability, but I can imagine how some people would feel like they might get canceled for saying something like that. And that's so interesting. That's telling of the culture, right? That's telling of like, well,
Yeah.
why is it that talking about personal accountability, personal responsibility, and discipline is like kind of taboo depending on the circle that you're in, right? And it's like, oh, well, we have
Because
so many.
everybody's already trying so hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, man. I think
But
that's
I'm sorry, I ain't mean to cut you off. I
no,
just
you're good. And this is a big reason of why we're having these conversations and what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to figure out what's the uniting ideal. In the last video, we spoke about love as the uniting ideal, and we tried to flesh that out. And you and I both believe in the collective unconscious and the archetypes, and how these archetypal motifs are pointers to, if not the best ideals, good enough ideals that we could start with. Like, that's why these stories are still remembered, is because they have pragmatic utility, even if we don't understand it explicitly, right? Like, why is Snow White, or Snow White? Why are so many of the Disney movies, which are um, representations of older myths and fairy tales, still being recreated? Now, some recreations are better and worse, but still, like, it's like, why have some of these ideas and old stories lasted so long? It's because I think they point to something useful, and something about those ideas can be helpful in guiding us to figure out what uniting narratives and uniting ideals could be for us.
definitely. And I think this is just interesting figuring out that. And what I've been, even with the whole idea going back to like the objective and subjective thing, looking at it from the idea of the right and the left, like there still has to be this third point for it to structure into our reality well enough, and we don't allow for that in any way. And I think it's interesting because what do we have? I guess the liberal party would be that supposed balancer, but most of society disregards it as a factor. They're part of the conversation. We listen to their ideas, but we don't trust their ability to lead in how we think. And I think that's the result of what we're actually talking about here, is that there's not comfort in the fluidity of that middle point. You see what I'm saying? Like, people are comfortable with structure and people are comfortable with knowing that there's no rules. But trying to balance the two, people just don't want to think about it. They don't want to be responsible for it. They don't want to have to actively make those type of decisions. They rather it just be one way or the other. That's where a lot of more people are comfortable. And it speaks to our psychological state, where we haven't really balanced both sides of our thinking in a way. So we either prefer thinking one way or we prefer thinking the other. We're either creative or we're logical. You know what I'm saying? That's the same thing we talk about in relationships and why we have a hard time. And so what we think about is the reason why we can't unify as a whole is because none of us are at the point where unification is logical for us. We can't psychologically comprehend it in a way that's cohesive. Our understanding of the reality is too fractured for us to really put it together well. And I think that's what we've been doing as humanity and as society over the years, is refining those ideals. But I think that we're at a critical mass point in human history where we've kind of covered everything. Like, there's not a conversation or a way of thinking or psychosis that hasn't been researched at some level. Like, yeah, there's some small offshoots, but generally we have an idea of how the path that most people are walking. And I believe if we took a second to pause with that information, we could build a system that facilitates the majority of what we experience. And we could build it in a way that where it could be able to pick up on these nuances that come in and facilitate them if they need to. And that's the issue with the system that we have, is that it doesn't allow for new things, new nuances to come into the picture.
And this is a man. You said that you feel like our system is inadequately prepared to encourage and facilitate new ideas. Is that part of what you said?
Basically, it's not able to facilitate new paradigms. Anything outside of where the left and the right facilitate ideas, or where the masculine and feminine or the logical and creative ideas come in, there's not a real. But the reason why we have such an issue at the lower levels and at these different specific points is because there's such a variety of things going on, and we're not facilitating those things at the top. The things at the bottom aren't getting fed because the top overall system isn't even being considered well enough.